Does it sound okay? Yeah? Okay. Welcome. We'll sit together quietly and then have a talk. Of actually finish the story of Jumping Mouse, the third segment of it, and see what's up with you. Yeah. Okay, so let's sit. So welcome. At the end of the evening, we'll put out a sign-up sheet if anybody would like to talk. There are short discussion slots to meet with me one-on-one on Saturday. If you want to talk about the state of the larger Sangha and what's happening with ATS. And so that you can just put your name and email down. We'll put a sign up sheet there, and we would just meet here and have a conversation in the office one-on-one. So.
Did you say that's on Saturday?
What's that?
The meetings are on Saturday?
Yeah, from 2 to 6 is when I put times out, and
That's the March too, is in the morning?
The March that's right, the March is in the morning, yeah. Interfaith Climate Justice March, 9:15 at the Ferry Building. And we're sending info out, but everyone's welcome to join me and others there. Yeah, and of course I'm cognizant of all of the turbulence and pain within the Sangha, and I'm not trying to ignore that in not addressing it each time. Yeah. But if you need to connect about that, please do. So, Jumping Mouse heard a roaring in her ears. She explored and found the great river, the river of life. She returned to her community of mice, and nobody seemed to hear the roaring that she heard, and she started to experience some profound alienation. She had a vision of the sacred mountains, and then found a very comfortable place with lots of busy things to do. But the kind of owner of that abode didn't believe in the sacred mountains, thought it was a myth. And so she goes on. She meets a great buffalo who is sick and dying, and the only medicine to heal the great buffalo is the eye of a mouse, which she apprehensively surrenders. Yeah, and the buffalo is like this kind of reverential figure, and and described as just there's certain kind of awe and gratitude that this mouse has for this buffalo, who protects the mouse on the journey to the base of the sacred mountains, protects the mouse from eagles that might prey upon her. And so we're closing, getting to the end of the story, and it's a parable that is so rich with kind of dharma curiosities that I've been reading portions of the story and then sharing reflections on ways to interpret this like extremely rich story from I think the Lakota tradition into a Buddhist context. So and just to add that this story is relevant for the moment too. So the jumping mouse has this kind of like reverential experience, this almost a certain kind of awe at the greatness of the buffalo, but the buffalo's dying, and one way we can read it is that she's actually waking up. Jumping mouse is waking up to goodness and waking up to heart qualities that have been kind of obscured, that are latent, dormant, maybe even dying, and she's starting actually to wake up to goodness. And it reminded me of the kind of years doing metta practice, doing loving kindness practice, and just finding myself crying. And sometimes that was for the kind of, just accumulation of grief, or almost like mourning the confusion and suffering of my life and of, my history. But then there was this other aspect of the tears where it was like I actually started to feel very moved by goodness, And it was not a personal kind of goodness. It was not a self-specialness or something like that at all. It was just like, like I didn't know goodness, like the goodness of metta existed. At least I didn't know how deep it could run or how wide it could feel. And to a large extent, this practice is about coming to be moved by goodness. Of the heart actually opening to this reality. We open, of course, to suffering by necessity, but we are actually learning to, developing a certain kind of reverential experience of goodness. And it's not yours, it's not being conceited, you don't have to worry about any of that. It's just, you just start to actually touch into the openness of the heart. And it feels like grace, Yeah, it feels like, wow, I don't know, I almost couldn't believe that the heart could rest in that way. And then, of course, we start to recognize this in others. And it's not exactly idealization, but when we just feel goodness, there's certain kind of awe, reverence for it. And so Jumping Mouse is waking up to grace and love here. And then quite provocatively, she's asked to give up an eye. The buffalo says, the only thing that can heal me is an eye. The eye of a mouse. And as soon as she makes the intention to make this renunciation, she loses her eye, and the buffalo is made whole. And we can read this in a lot of different ways, but one perspective is that it means that we are actually giving up a view, at the very least giving up clinging to a particular view, but maybe even more radically giving up momentarily all views. Not just the attachment to views, but all views. So in some early suttas from the Buddha, it says, abiding in their own views, all who argue this alone is true, either incur blame or obtain praise. One who knows doesn't get involved in any particular opinion. Why would someone who's unattached, who doesn't go along with what's seen and heard, become attached? It's not easy to overcome being entrenched in views, wishing to take up a doctrine. Those who are cleansed do not form a view. One who is attached argues over doctrines. How and with what does one argue with someone unattached? Embracing nothing, rejecting nothing, right here, a person has shaken off every view. Normally we think about becoming less attached to views. The Buddha was invited that, to start to drain some of the emotional charge from the view of things are this way or that way. But here the Buddha is even more radical, saying that we are actually giving up view. And some level, cognition, having a view, being conscious, figuring things out, that entire kind of machinery exists for self-protection. But if one felt completely at peace and perfectly safe, there would be no need to take up any view whatsoever. Maybe we get even little hints of this at the end of a really quiet sit for us. And it's like we open our eyes, and there's no effort for the mind to scramble and put together a whole list of our opinions and remind ourselves of who we are and what we want and what we hate, of what's true and what's false. It's just like the eyes are open. Nisargadatta made this very intriguing comment around views. Said, there's only one mistake you're making. You take the inner for the outer and the outer for the inner. The mind and feelings are external, but you take them to be intimate. You believe the world to be objective, while it is entirely a projection of your psyche. That is the basic confusion. Yeah. So that the inner experience, like the experience of thought and feeling, it feels so totally native and personal to us. There are ways we can actually experience that as not different than the sights and sounds outside of us, made of the same stuff. Yeah. And so they're both very familiar, but they no longer feel like they're manufactured in the house of self. But the world, what is normally we think of as outside, Nisargadatta is asking us to consider the possibility that it is way more than we believe, a projection of our mind. Not to deny that there's any reality or something like that, but just to say that as the Dhammapada begins, mind precedes everything. Yeah? That the world is always mediated through our own sensory perception, and that our view actually profoundly shapes the world in which we inhabit, the nature of our experience. That the I is, the jumping mouse's eye is the medicine. The medicine is right here in this fathom-long body, the Buddha says. Right here in this fathom-long body, there is the medicine. The Rohitassa Sutta, it's just within this fathom-long body with its perception and intellect that I declare that there is the cosmos, the origination of the cosmos, the cessation of the cosmos, and the path of practice leading to the cessation of the cosmos. And then we're, in some sense, being asked to give something up, to a renunciation. The I is given. And there are a lot of transformations of Buddhism in this culture, but many of them, in my opinion, seem helpful and onward leading. But of course some will find are problematic. And one of the kind of virtues in traditional Buddhism that is probably getting lower billing these days is renunciation. Yeah? It's not exactly our cultural speed, you know. So this is Ajahn Amaro, a monk and abbot, who's asked about some of the trends in Western Buddhism and the kind of cushy retreat centers, and says it's a huge issue, really. Dharma on my terms. Is it Dharma? Contrast that to Dharma in line with Dharma. If Dharma is practiced according to my preferences, it's not necessarily a gateway to liberation. That's its danger. It seems to me that for many lay people in our society who go off to the night retreat centers, the whole role of renunciation is excised from the Dharma field. The fact that the Buddha was a monk gets lost. Of course, people are free to practice as they want. Nonetheless, many Western Dharma centers seem to marginalize what to the rest of the Buddhist world is central and historically vital to the whole process of practice and enlightenment. It's like opening up the chest, detaching all the veins and arteries, carefully removing the heart and maintaining the body on a life support system. One can't help wonder, is this thing really alive? Is this really going to carry on? Obviously, my perspective is slanted. I'm a card-carrying monk. But in wedging Dharma teachings into a comfortable life, one may be missing something that's crucial to the Dharma. I would suggest that people look closely at that. Is the Dharma something that I tack onto my life, or is it something that I offer myself up to? Yeah. This question of what we give up in practice, what we're willing to give up, is important. And critically, we're not being asked to give up anything that actually makes us happy, right? One teacher was like, that would be insane to give up things that actually make us happy. It's what's being targeted in this is a kind of certain forms of pleasure or clinging that actually obscure deeper modes of well-being. So the last thing before I read the closing passages is Jumping Mouse was protected by the buffalo. Jumping Mouse ran under the buffalo so that the eagles could not see her. And this actual sense of refuge, the beginning of safety. So she's at the base of the mountains here. Jumping Mouse immediately began to investigate her new surroundings. There were even more things here than in the other places, busier things, and an abundance of seeds and other things mice like. In her investigation of these things, suddenly she ran upon a gray wolf who was sitting there doing absolutely nothing. "Hello, Brother Wolf," Jumping Mouse said. The wolf's ears came alert and his eyes shone. "Wolf, wolf. Yes, that's what I am. I'm a wolf." But then his mind dimmed again, and it was not long before he sat quietly again, completely without memory as to who he was. Each time Jumping Mouse reminded him who he was, he became excited with the news, but would soon forget again. Such a great being, thought Jumping Mouse, but he has no memory. Jumping Mouse went to the center of her new place and was quiet. She listened for a very long time to the beating of her heart. Then suddenly she made up her mind. She scurried back to where the wolf sat and she spoke. "Brother Wolf." "Wolf, wolf," said the wolf. "Please, Brother Wolf," said Jumping Mouse, "please listen to me. I know what will heal you. It is one of my eyes, and I want to give it to you. You are a greater being than I. I'm only a mouse. Please take it." When Jumping Mouse stopped speaking, her eye flew out of her head and the wolf was made whole. Tears fell down the cheeks of the wolf, but his little sister could not see them, for she was now blind. "You are a great sister," said the wolf. "For now I have my memory, but now you are blind. I am the guide into the sacred mountains. I will take you there. There is a great medicine lake there, the most beautiful lake in the world. All the world is reflected there. The people, the lodges of the people, and all the beings of the prairies and skies. Please take me there," Jumping Mouse said. The wolf guided her through the pines to the medicine lake. Jumping Mouse drank from the water from the lake. The wolf described the beauty to her. I must leave you here, said Wolf, for I must return so that I may guide others, but I will remain with you as long as you like. Thank you, my brother, said Jumping Mouse. But although I'm frightened to be alone, I know you must go so that you may show others the way to this place. Jumping Mouse sat there, trembling in fear. There was no use running, for she was blind, but she knew an eagle would find her. She felt a shadow on her back and heard the sound that eagles make. She braced herself for the shock, and the eagle hit. Jumping Mouse went to sleep. Then she woke up. The surprise of being alive was great, but now she could see. Everything was blurry, but the colors were beautiful. I can see, said Jumping Mouse over and over again. A blurry shape came toward Jumping Mouse. Jumping Mouse squinted hard, but the shape remained a blur. Hello, sister, a voice said. Do you want some medicine? Some medicine for me? Asked Jumping Mouse. Yes, yes. Then crouch down as low as you can, the voice said, and jump as high as you can. Jumping Mouse did as she was instructed. She crouched as low as she could and jumped. The wind caught her and carried her higher. Do not be afraid, the voice called to her. Hang onto the wind and trust. Jumping Mouse did. She closed her eyes and hung onto the wind, and it carried her higher and higher. Jumping Mouse opened her eyes, and they were clear, and the higher she went, the clearer they became. Jumping Mouse saw her old friend upon a lily pad on the beautiful medicine lake. It was the frog. You have a new name called the frog. You are Eagle. And that's the end. We're getting into the very non-casual portions of practice here. So she's there. I mean, there's so much. I don't even. I'm sure many of you have interpretations that I'm completely missing. It's very dense with symbolism, but I'll highlight a few things, and then we'll open it up. So, sitting there waiting for Eagle, in that state of like radical vulnerability, the kind of full surrender of practice. And, you know, when I talk about this, I'm not, I don't have this in mind for everybody. Like, I don't want to prescribe a path of practice for everyone and say this is actually what is supposed to feel native to you. And I just want to acknowledge that there are times in practice when we no longer care so much about our life anymore. And what we actually care about is awareness and love, you know, and the kind of, you know, that sort of like endless task of cobbling together a workable life. That just takes a kind of back seat to this kind of burning wish to know. Some years ago, I was in retreat, and I have a chronic pain condition. That's actually, it was from an old meditation injury that just became chronic pain, and but I sort of am familiar with it and know how it manifests. But in this retreat, it kind of like spread, and so what the pain was like really through my whole body, including, I remember, like in my face. And it wasn't so much that the pain itself was actually bearable. It was just like this like complete abject terror of bodily disintegration. Yeah. And in retreat, it's like the mind, there's a lot less friction in the mind, and so when it goes somewhere, like it's as one of my teachers says, it's like it's spiritually onward leading but psychologically regressive. The experience of retreat, we get into these like kind of regress states, and I was definitely in this kind of certain kind of like childlike terror. And I couldn't sit or stand. I was just in my room practicing, just lying on one side. The only position that was okay was lying on my side. And so I was just like lying on one side for however long, an hour or something, and then just flipping to my other side and spending weeks just practicing in that way. And it was this kind of it was a deep surrender. Again, there's this image of losing vision, losing an eye, and then regaining it. And so, importantly, like the deeper states of meditation require a willingness to be disoriented. The ordinary kind of reference points are elusive, and we're sort of like, it feels like we're sort of an image of like being at a different altitude where the air feels much thinner. It's interesting that the practice is actually the same. She began with the request to crouch as low as you can and to jump as high as you can, to humble oneself in the face of the sacred mountains, to crouch low, and then to generate as much effort as one can to leap up. And it seems relevant to me that the practice instructions at the beginning and the end of the path are the same. And my experience in working with meditators is that most of the way the instructions get tweaked, it's very idiosyncratic, but the actual basic instructions on day 1 or day 5,000 or whatever, they're similar. And it's just these kinds of subtle tweaks that are appropriate for people as they get deeper into the path. Hang onto the wind, letting go into anicca, into impermanence, to live in the open air, to relinquish the kind of ground of one's story. And sometimes we can get like some taste of this. Happens a lot in the visual field. It's like, I don't know, the kind of, the way our self story and the narrative and the sense of future and past, like, and being sandwiched between those, it creates this actual sense of ground. But we can sometimes just get just a little bit quiet and gaze upon the world, look up at the sky, and start to notice space. And our being starts to feel much more porous, sometimes even run through with space. And so we're asked to habituate to a certain kind of groundlessness, and all of the impulses around affirming who we are and what we want and our cravings and our aversions and the story of self, all of that is creating a kind of artificial sense of ground. And so we hang onto the wind. Hang onto the wind. Now, the last thing. To acknowledge that there's a genetic overlap between birds and mice. So, what does that mean? This maybe fantasy of like this complete transformation, yeah, of enlightenment remaking the person entirely or something, is a misunderstanding. Ajahn Sumedho said it's not the personality that gets enlightened. Yeah. It's not the personality the personality hopefully is like a little bit more functional than it was, but not even always. And it's not the personality that gets enlightened, but at the same time, you know, my impulse is to say, like, yeah, but we really need to be accountable for our personality and to acknowledge what has changed and what hasn't. Yeah. And it's easy it's like the ego's last trick is to crystallize around spiritual awakenings, yeah? And become maybe grandiose. Yeah. And so to me, even though the mouse, now Eagle's vision is becoming clearer and clearer as she gets higher and higher, that feels right, and I want to always honor for all of us, the permanent possibility of being wrong. You know, that nothing can actually protect us from that risk. And that means that there's some humility from now till forever. Jumping mouse. So I'll open it for any, it could be questions about practice, questions about what's been said, questions about whatever's close to your heart, really. Yeah, please, Amy.
Earlier take in the story, and I wanted to hear your take on the mouse was halfway through the field that knows about the river but doesn't know.
So wait, say it again.
There's that mouse that she meets partway through.
Yeah.
It says, yeah, the river's real, but the mountain's not.
Oh, right.
And I was just wondering what your take on that little vignette.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, what I immediately thought of with that was in the kind of story of the Buddha, the mythology of the Buddha. The Buddha initially was trained primarily in concentration practices, and as the story goes, mastered them quickly. They were, it was the meditative absorptions, jhanas in Pali. And the teachers said, basically, this is as good as it gets, yeah? And the Buddha could appreciate, like, oh, this is extremely refined form of wholesome pleasure, pervasive, exquisite, sublime. But my heart is not fully complete. Yeah, I'm still subject to a sense of lack. Yeah, and so as the Buddhist story goes, he moved on, continuing to seek, even though he could have hung out in a good place, just like Jumping Mouse. Jumping Mouse could have hung out in a good place, lots of seeds, protected from the eagles, like it was good, but there was a sense of like, I actually need to see more. And one of my teachers said, Shinzen Young, he said something like, don't, in your spiritual practice, don't get stuck in a good place. Don't get stuck in a good place. Sometimes we get comfortable and there's some fruit of practice, but don't get stuck in a good place. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Paul.
I thought it was interesting how afraid the mouse was of the eagles all the way through the story until she becomes one.
Right.
And I was wondering if there's fruit to be had there or not.
Yeah. I don't know. What do you think? What do you think?
Well, it sounds like it's kind of coming from a warrior culture
Mm.
and preparing someone to be able to be more of a leader than
Interesting. Wow. Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
So in that vein, we were talking about renunciation
Yeah.
before, and it's all about being afraid of being without all these things. But then enlightenment is being willing to be with us, is giving up all that clinging, and that seemed like in order to become an eagle, the mouse had to give up all the mouseness. Fly.
Yeah.
In order to see well, she had to become completely blind.
Yeah, to see well, she had to become completely blind. Yeah. And the question with renunciation, like, for a long time, I would do this little kind of thought experiment in my head. If I were really committed to this path, would I be a monk? Yeah. And that, even though I've been, deeply compelled by the path of practice, that never felt quite right. And I still don't totally know what to make of that. But I don't know if we have to give up everything, but I think maybe we have to be willing to give up everything. At least everything incomplete, yeah. But that's a real question. Like I have just recently taken on sort of like some more kind of renunciate practices, because I did feel like I was in a little bit of I was too comfortable. Which doesn't sound like a problem, but there was a certain way in which practice felt too comfortable. And so sometimes it can, when we have kind of energy and there's a sort of sense of motivation, okay, we feel ready to give something up, and maybe very modest, but it's just like, yeah, there's energy to give. Yeah. Please?
Just have a question about practice.
Yeah.
I'm pretty early in my practice, and I'm confused about awareness versus, let's say, concentration versus,
Yeah.
let's say, like alacrity versus alertness.
Yeah.
So I think something that I'm looking for help with is like how to sort of disambiguate during my practice.
Yeah. And so what are you, what would the answer to that question give you? I'm not trying to dodge it, but just...
So for instance, this evening, sitting, I felt really sort of an increase in scope of what I was aware of, and I could really hear a lot of sounds and sort of probe at those sounds and piece them apart. And it was very pleasant, but then it occurred to me that I was maybe sort of on like a diversion, just sort of actively hearing things and probing into them. Like maybe my attention would be somewhere else, because of course, like I think about the breath. That's the place where my attention should be, and so I wasn't quite sure whether I was playing games.
In general, you can look and just try to sense in, like, is there sincerity here? Am I really actually trying to learn, open, love, or am I just bored with the breath? Yeah, and the general suggestion is it can be really helpful to have a certain anchor, a focus in mind. If you just sort of give your mind a million choices of how to attend, it will tend to weaken the concentration. And so it can be useful just to commit, okay, I'm attending to this. And then you actually know that if it makes it clear when a choice to attend to sound is driven by boredom or actual sincere interest and it seems productive, or you just can't be with the breathing and it's appropriate to move to another object. But it's good to know what you're focusing on and what is outside your focus space. Yeah, so we focus on something that's inside the focus space, maybe right here. The circle of the focus space is right here. Or if it were sound, it would be here, right? But we know where that line ends and what we're not attending to, yeah? And so you don't have to get tight or rigid about it, but just look to be using the attention in a careful, gentle way. And we discover a lot. It's our inner life is often likened to the wilderness, and we'll discover a lot. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, maybe one more if there are any. Yeah, no.
I've been in kind of a challenging place for my practice. The thoughts are quick and not super helpful. Lots of spinning, while trying to figure shit out. The advice I've gotten has been that the answers will not come from the realm of thought, to explore feeling. And my feeling about most things is, fuck it. Plenty of things that are wholesome or supportive or really destructive and super self-centered. The felt sense is fairly like blasé and non-committal. So it's not super helpful. It's challenging to make choices from a place where the sensations are super subtle and just feel rather resigned. So it's been the practice has just been kind of noticing that disinterest and not paying too much attention to it and letting it make the calls as far as what actions I take. But I'm in kind of this holding pattern. I'm not really sure what's changing or what's going to change, and trying to act from an authentic place. What feels authentic is kind of depressed and doesn't give a shit about anything.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was hearing. I was hearing a little bit of the flattening of depressive feeling, where it's different than sadness. It's actually just like the affect just gets flattened, gets smashed, and it's a state of lack of motivation and inspiration, and
like I was in the front row of the Slayer show last week, and the stage is on fire. There's thousands of people behind me, and I can kind of like take it or leave it.
Right. That's supposed to
like literally like my favorite band.
Right. Yeah. That should be
anything but flat. Like,
that's not flat. Yeah. Slayer, fire, front row.
The felt sense of that is non-committal.
Right. Yeah. Well, it does sound like a certain kind of depressive flattening, which is, usually it will like shift and you kind of just are patient. You have to be a little bit more careful of the sort of dipping into rumination, and more active, be more connected to other people. You have to sort of drag yourself, even though we think of the mind leads the body. No, it's like the body dragging the mind, and you just stay engaged and active. And as far as practice, it may be you need to use your judgment. It may be that sometimes, totally body focused, but then if you find yourself actually getting quiet, maybe at the end of a sit, you might drop a question in and see whether the mind can actually work with it in a non-ruminating way, like work with it, that actually a sense of, that there's a reason why the attention doesn't stay at the breath. There's a reason why evolution has conserved that habit so deeply across our, time. And it's not just to make you feel like a shitty meditator. It's like it has a function, And so, like, if it's not getting into the quicksand of rumination, at at certain times, you might just drop in the question of figuring out what, and you may need to figure out what the question actually is. But just drop it in and see what happens. Yeah. So we've got to wrap up. How many people are new here tonight? Okay. Yeah, welcome. I don't know whether it's me and I'm projecting the inside-outside confusion, but it feels like we've weathered something, and are beaten up by what's going on for sure. And, there are fewer people here. Maybe it's a holiday, but fewer people and just the general tone. And yeah, so I don't have any simple resolution other than just to acknowledge that's what's here. Yeah, that's right now what practice is, and there are conversations and developments on those fronts, and we're all trying to be conscious of our impacts and decisions, and just to say that I'm fully planning to stay connected to and in service with the Sangha, and so I'm not vanishing. But obviously, yeah, my heart is with you to the extent that this is painful. Yeah, so I want to acknowledge that. Okay. Matt, we don't have anything on I'm just remembering, I might have got crossed up with Jason. This Saturday from 2 to 6, that's okay to do meetings here? Don't know. Is anybody planning to do anything on here Saturday?
I got this.
Yeah. Thank you.
Listen, on Friday, there's another planning meeting.
Yeah.
For what happens after September 30th.
Yeah.
And then in the morning on Saturday, unfortunately during the march,
Right.
There's going to be a subsequent meeting from 10 till probably noon.
Okay.
1 o'clock. If anyone wants to be involved in what happens after we possibly shut down.
Yeah. Thank you.
Paul, there's no workshop or any retreat or anything other activity?
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, anyway, I'm happy.
You have a way, you have keys, right, to get in?
I do, yeah. I think. No, somebody always opens the door for me. Yeah, Laura.
Yeah, just a quick announcement for anybody who didn't hear. To help out our manager, Jason, we've got a GoFundMe in support of his transition, since the center shutting down has been his livelihood and it's very short notice. So if you just go to GoFundMe and look for Jason Colon, or we'll have an envelope here if you prefer to make a cash donation. And then just to clarify, we have a sign-up list for the Google group, not the sign-up list for one-on-one, so there's 2 separate lists apparently. But if you'd like to keep in touch on email, just with the Sangha itself, we have a Google group, so feel free.
Thank you.
I just want to say that, I mean, like, part of the reason to really, Jason's really doing a lot to help manage everybody through this.
Yeah.
And you've got 2 autistic kids, and it's gonna hit him pretty hard.
Mm-hmm.
So, thank you for setting that up. I think that's awesome. And there's some really good reasons to support him, because he's been so supportive to many of us.
Thank you. Okay, folks. So, just closing eyes for one moment and may our efforts, our offering of attention, our intentions, may this serve us. May we find peace, and may that peace ripple out into the lives of those we share, and be a cause for less suffering, more joy, safety, peace. Thank you.